Thank you, Mariah, for those great introductions. Thank you also to Williams for inviting everybody back to the Purple Valley during leaf season, and thank you to the panelists for coming in. Easy for me to moderate, I live here in town. But anyway, what I hope we can do tonight in the brief time together is to share the stories that help demonstrate the breadth and variety of entrepreneurial paths, and the nature of entrepreneurship is such that there are many, there's no one way to succeed and no prescription for success. It takes all different kinds of opportunities and forms, and I think you'll hear that here tonight. The women you see here tonight represent a number of different types of ventures, from tangible consumer products, online communities, marketplaces, and service offerings. And they all represent a variety of funding, from bootstrapping to venture capital. And as you listen to the stories and discussions, I hope you'll conclude that entrepreneurship is about so much more than coding up the next killer app, because that's what we hear about so much today with all the social media apps and so forth. But it's really about identifying and solving problems and meeting needs, and in new and unique ways. And I think you'll hear that through the stories of the women here. And it's just so fun for me sitting here, because I never dreamed when I was at Williams that I would be on a panel on entrepreneurship, or that I would have been a venture capitalist. So now I get the opportunity to be the venture capitalist sitting here with the entrepreneurs, which is really kind of fun, because I know, at least in my day, that was not a career path out of here that I was even remotely thinking about. And I don't know whether you guys were when you were here or not, but that's part of what maybe we can talk about tonight. So I want to start it off. We are going to take about 40 minutes with the panelists talking, and then open it up for Q&A for about the last 20 minutes. So look forward. Think of your questions. So you've got great questions for this group. Anyway, so I think what I'd like to start with is kind of that question, thinking about, were you thinking about being an entrepreneur? Were you here? What motivated you to become an entrepreneur? And how did you know once you started on it that it was the right thing, or maybe it wasn't? So I don't know, Tracy, do you want to start?
Sure.
And I'd love to hear from each of you.
Well, the easy answer to the second part of the question was I didn't know it was the right thing to do. So for me, I started being an entrepreneur, went into an entrepreneurial opportunity in May of 2000, which, for those of you who know anything about history, know that's about the worst possible time to start a company. .com bomb. But so I was about 12 years out of college. So I had worked in small organizations for the most part. I'd gone and done a graduate degree. And I was basically, it was an opportunity that was presented to me. So I was in a small company that had gotten big. It had merged with another company. And it was really a choice between going off with some coworkers to do something new and creative and interesting, work with a bunch of smart people, or stick around a company that was going through a merger and do messy integration work. So I basically, being one of the most risk-averse persons you'll ever probably meet, said, well, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna go work with these guys. At least I know I'll be doing something interesting. I have no idea if we'll make any money, but at least it'll be fun. And it turned out we did develop a successful company. We sold it after about 6 years to WebMD. And I worked there for a couple of years, and then said, okay, now what? And two of my business partners from the Subimo, the company, previously started another venture. And I said, well, here I am at this crossroads again. I could either go with these guys and do something interesting, or go potentially into corporate America. So I chose the path I'd gone down before, and we'll see what happens.
Well, that's what we call in venture capital a serial entrepreneur, and they're the best to back because they know how hard it is. They've made mistakes, and they know sort of the shortcuts to success down the road. So
I remember the first time, somebody called me a serial entrepreneur, and I said, "Ooh, I don't know." So that's my story.
So I had no idea I would be an entrepreneur when I left Williams. I was a psychology major, and I went straight from Williams to get my master's in social work, and then worked as a social worker. And I loved working as a social worker. I was a therapist and worked with kids in foster care. Had found my passion, was completely fulfilled and happy, became a mom, and my son's pants started falling down when he was potty training. And my life took a turn that I could never have predicted. And it wasn't like there was a moment where I said, I'm going to become an entrepreneur now. I literally was solving a tangible problem in my household, discovered that there were no belts on the market that a young child could actually fasten independently, and knew that my son wanted to be independent, was craving independence. So my sister and I, my sister's class of 98, I'm class of 94, we went into business together and invented a belt closure that was easy for kids to fasten.
So and you have to show it to them.
Oh, and my self-belts was born. So basically, one end of the belt snaps around a belt loop, if you can imagine, and it's kind of fixed in place and stays there all day. And then I should have worn one. And then the other side opens and closes throughout the day with just one hand. So it's just a one-handed closure, and it keeps your kids' pants up. And we also have them for adults and teens with hand dexterity challenges. So there's also a whole special needs segment. But when I initially invented this belt with my sister, and I got our prototype in the mail that she went to New York to the garment district and found some fabric and had a belt made, and I got this in the mail, I was like, this is an invention? I mean, it was crazy. It's just so simple. But it was an invention, and it's patented, and our business was born, and we just kind of, as I said, I was a social worker, so I didn't know canvas from twill. And so we initially, our belts are made from China from the get-go, and we've just learned and learned as we went along, and I'm now an entrepreneur, but it wasn't a plan, so it just kind of was created by the moment.
And Jess, how about you? Yeah, our youngest beloved here.
Which I don't think I planned it either, but I would say while I was here, what I was really probably thinking about was when the next First Fridays party would be, and like how if I was a JA, so how my freshmen were faring. But I was an economics major, and I took a pretty traditional path out of Williams. I went and I did management consulting for 4 years, and I learned a lot there, and I was very, very happy. But I had this impulse while I was working that I really wanted to be in the world building things. I didn't want to be as much in a corporate environment, and I didn't want to be as much the boss I wouldn't really want to work for someone else. I wanted to have an ownership of this thing that I could put in the world. So I left my very nice job with very good people, and I decided to go back to graduate school. And while I was in graduate school, I sort of walked into the first day of school the same way I walked into the first day of Williams, and sat down next to someone who had no idea. I didn't really like her to begin with. And we soon became very good friends, and we decided to co-found a company together. And the company that we founded is called Alfred, and it's a way of sort of looking at the world and saying, let's imagine a world where you can have the help in your home that was previously only available to the wealthiest people in the world. So how do I give you back your time? How do I support you? And how do I create that for everyone, regardless of your socioeconomic status or background? So I went through my first year of graduate school, getting my MBA, and I was like, school is great, and I still think school is great. But then I decided to leave graduate school. So I took a leave of absence to work on Alfred, and subsequently went and raised some seed capital from venture capitalists. Went back to graduate school, participated in a business plan competition, and have been building the company out of Boston and now New York. So I would definitely tell you I had no intention of being an entrepreneur, but I think the thing that Williams taught me was if you pay attention to yourself and you really listen to what you want to do, then these sort of things kind of perkle up and you get to go do them.
Well, perfect lead into the next question, which I was going to ask everyone was, how did your Williams education prepare you for being an entrepreneur? But what's interesting is you said you didn't plan to be an entrepreneur, yet you were the only one who sort of said you wanted to run your own business and not work for someone else. So you had in your mind that I'm going to go run something or do something.
I think that you can label it, you want to be an entrepreneur, but it's really, do you want to go build things in the world? And people tend to call that being an entrepreneur, but for me it was just like, I want to go build things in the world. Like, you can call me a consultant, you can call me a lawyer, you can whatever. I'm going to go build things in the world. Entrepreneur sounds like a great title.
I also think it's interesting that none of us said we did it because we wanted to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier, and saying that if it were 3 men sitting up here, we probably would have heard that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I just say that from my experience as a venture capitalist when I was a young VC and we were at an offsite and kind of going around the room. So why, our boss is asking us why we wanted to be in venture capital, and the guys, 3 guys ahead of me saying, well, I want to make a ton of money and I want to make a lot of money. And I sort of went, oh, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. I just really help building companies and it's really interesting work. And it was just it was sort of an aha moment for me. I was young, okay.
Well, and in my company, Sabimo, we had 2 men and 2 women as the partners starting the company. And it was clear that the 2 guys were really focused on how do we grow this business so we can flip it in 6 months. This was, right before everything fell apart in the economy. And that was what people did. You built a business and you flipped it in 6 months and became rich. And there was definitely a difference between the way they were thinking about things and the way my female partner and I were thinking about things. So.
And you guys really probably can't appreciate, but to have started this business in 2000, I was blown away that she survived, because that was a really tough time and a lot of companies didn't survive that had been well funded and ran out of money because they couldn't get the next round. And I mean, I had some of those companies that we backed. But anyway.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say that.
You.
Well, I was going to say that Williams taught me. I think Well, first I joke that my psychology background helps me with customer service, because you get some crazy people who call and you kind of steer them therapeutically to a happy solution, which is really true. I use my skills, but also just not being afraid to ask questions, knowing I knew nothing about this world that I was entering, and not feeling insecure about that, feeling motivated by that, like how to seek out people to ask questions to, how to know that that doesn't make me unintelligent, that makes me intelligent, to be searching for answers and to not be afraid to do that. And I think that those skills of really researching and knowing that there's a solution to a problem and figuring out who to ask are things that I learned here.
I always tell people that I learned how to think and how to write at Williams, and I think those, are obviously critical. Thinking about how to approach something new that you've never encountered before. It was something I continued to have reinforced when I spent a couple of years consulting and working in, areas of industry that I knew nothing about. I think the other thing is that I learned how to appreciate different perspectives, different people, different views. And, and what I do now in terms of thinking about consumers and how you help consumers through a process online, that's important, because I can think about what works for me, but I also need to think about what's going to work for other types of people. And I think Williams was really the first place that I encountered that.
Yeah, I think there are probably 3 things that I learned here. And the first and most important was how to lead people, like how to work as a team. So I played rugby while I was here, and if you think about being an entrepreneur, it sounds like it's a lonely job and it sounds like you're the boss, but it's such a team sport. Like, you cannot do anything by yourself, even if you are the most talented coder. So I think Williams was really the first place where I learned how to work in a team and how to invest in people and how to do that. The second thing is pattern recognition. We do so many things across so many different types of topics, whether it's history, art history, economics, Jewish studies, whatever the case may be. And what you're really doing is you're training your brain to see patterns and opportunities that would be counterintuitive to anyone else. And if you look at the world and you see things and you're like, oh, I want to do that differently, that's a really good sign. And then I think the third thing is we're really generalists. So I meet so many tech people and so many coders, and they're like, I'm going to go build this. And I'm like, you don't even know what problem you're solving. So the ability to take a step back and sort of say, I think I can look at this critically and think critically was something that Williams hammered into me. Right.
Yeah, very true. So, we all hate to fail, especially Williams students, but everybody does. But we learn from our failures. I mean, those are some of the best learning experiences. So what role did failures, or what can you think of an instance of a failure that really moved you forward with your business or helped you move on? Why don't we start with you, Talia?
When I think of one of the pitfalls I faced or a failure, my failures have always been when I didn't trust my instinct, and when I went with what I didn't feel comfortable enough to be assertive, And I've learned that often the hard way. We were going to be in Nordstrom, and I'd worked on it for years getting into Nordstrom. And they finally called me in like April and said, "You're in. Let's ship these in May." Well, May and June, like our belt world is dead. No one buys belts in May and June. Kids are wearing shorts. Girls are wearing, summer clothes. No one needs a belt. So I knew that, and I knew that I should say, it's really not a good time. Just feel strong and in knowing my product, but I was just so happy that they were calling me, and I figured like this moment was going to be gone, and there was nothing I was going to be able to do about it. So I said, okay, and we shipped the belts. And once you failed at a place like that, if something doesn't sell, they're never going to try you again. And so I learned that I should have just been strong in my voice, and when that little voice says something, I need to always listen to it, even if it means not having a sale, because better to not have a sale than to have a bad sale. So I've since learned from that, and I have had experiences since then where I've said no, and it always has worked out well because they wait. But I just didn't know that. I was, you learn as you go, and that's just part of living.
Jess, how about you?
I'm like, all I can think of is all the times that I fail. I'm like, there's so many different, stories that I could tell. One of the first. The way that my company works is that we give our clients dedicated support in their homes. So I have employees that have their keys and they go in and they put things away. So one of the first people we hired had gone grocery shopping for this family for Thanksgiving, and they had of course requested turkey. And I had done a pretty terrible job of training this poor gentleman how to do his job appropriately. So he went into the home, put everything away, and then about 3 or 4 hours later, I got a call from the client being like, "Is there a reason my turkey's been left on the counter and not put in the fridge?" And I was like, "No, there's absolutely no reason for that at all." So I feel like when you're in anything, but particularly in this kind of work, failures they happen all the time, and they're actually really good things if you can figure that out, because the minute you fail, the minute you can fix something. And if you view it that way, then you're actually seeking failure because it means that you're learning as fast as possible.
As the product person in the companies that I've been involved in, I always hated missing launches and missing a launch deadline by either having bugs in the product or not having all the features that we wanted to have in it. And I think what I learned with some of the early launches that we did was that actually wasn't such a terrible thing. Having constraints around your time and your budget actually forces you to get a product out there. You try for something that's better than what you had, or better than what's out in the market already. If you strive for perfection, and I have to admit, I'm a perfectionist. I like to, ship a perfect product. I've never done it, but I like to think it's possible. But if you do that, you may end up, out of money, out of time, and shipping something that people don't even want to use. So what I learned from that was it was actually better, once I got over my angst over it, it was better to have the product out there, learn how people were using it, and that in and of itself was instructive. So.
And the goal sometimes the goal changes and shifts, and the road that you think is like this is like this, and you just have to just keep turning and just keep going, and just know that you think there's a barrier, an obstacle, oh my God, this has happened, it's a catastrophe. But if you just pause and stay calm, then you just find you figure out the direction to go, and it leads you, But calmness is important. Hard to find sometimes, but important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of entrepreneurs, and just what you're saying, a true entrepreneur is someone who you're going to run into problems no matter where, what you're doing, and you learn to back up, pivot, go a different direction, figure it out. They don't give up. And I think there's a real entrepreneurial spirit, and so much of that is this problem solving and, okay, that didn't work, now what do I do kind of thing. So we just have really a minute or so, and then we're going to turn it over to questions. But what advice do you guys? Pardon?
You have more time.
Okay.
We have 40 minutes too.
Oh, yeah, we have lots of time. Yeah. I'm going the wrong way with this counter. Sorry. Good, that's good. We have lots of time left. So,
lots more to talk about.
I'd love to know what advice you guys might have for somebody who wants to pursue an entrepreneurial path or start a business. What 2 or 3 things, what would you guys, and Feel free to interrupt each other too. You don't have to do it sequentially.
Well, I would start off with two things, and one of them is networking. I mean, Williams is one of the best networks that you could ever have among students, among alumni. It never ceases to amaze me what comes out of the Williams network. So I personally will always take networking calls with students, with alums. And it's one of those things that I remember a few years ago when I was in startup craziness with Sabimo, thinking, oh my God, I don't have time to do these. This is not how I should be spending my time. This is not what my partners want me to be doing. And I can't tell you the number of times that I would have a conversation with somebody that would lead up to maybe even a sales opportunity for us. It happened to me a couple weeks ago where somebody called me or contacted me out of the blue, and at the end of their message they said, oh, by the way, my brother Dennis O'Shea, who was the former president of the the Alumni Association, he says he knows you and we should definitely talk. So I said, all right, well, if he knows Dennis and they're related, I have to talk to this guy. And so we had this conversation. And after we hung up, about an hour later, I got an email saying thank you. And he said, oh, by the way, there was something I meant to mention to you on the call. I have these connections with this group here, and they heard about what you're doing in Ohio, and they want to talk to you. So, there's a great sales lead for us that I'm not even a salesperson for my company, but, that was what came out of the conversation. So always, always, always seek and take networking opportunities. And the other thing I would say is, especially when you think about coming out of Williams, what you want to do, seek opportunities to have new experiences and develop new skills. So don't be so concerned about what's the job title I'm going to have. I worked for a small company for 5 years out of Williams, and I can tell you I had a different job title every 6 months. It was the running joke. Oh, it's time to change job titles, So, but it didn't matter what my title was. It was what I was doing. And what I accumulated in those 5 years with that company was a set of experiences that I think, was huge when I went to start a company with my colleagues. So,
for me, I think it's hard to, as we all were talking about, we didn't plan this. So it's hard to say, well, what you should do if you want to be an entrepreneur. But for me, it was just following what I wanted to do anyway, which was I wanted to work with kids. And I think if my son's pants never had started falling down, I was kind of going towards starting a nonprofit. I was kind of finding that thing in myself where I found problems in the work I was doing and kids whose needs weren't being met and filling that void. So I think I probably would have been an entrepreneur in a different capacity. But I think if you just tend to go where you're interested, something will come toward you.
Yeah, and I really agree with that. This is going to sound pretty bizarre, but I really suggest that you close your computer and go in the world. And the reason I put it that way is because I think so much of starting a company or working at a company, you have to talk to clients. Even if you're building a tech product, they're real people that buy or consume that thing. So probably go talk to them and understand what their pain is or not that you're trying to solve. The other thing is there's only so much research you can do on Google. You won't see half of the things that you're really looking for if you aren't in the world. So the best advice I was given when I was starting my company was close the computer and leave the building. And I really, really believe that. And then the second thing I really echo is pay attention to yourself. You're going to be the guide here, and no one will really be able to tell you if this is something you want to do or not want to do. So have a nice internal compass, and that reflection process will be super helpful.
And the other thing is that you never know where something will lead. Yeah. My sister actually handed a belt to a random person at some expo, and 3 years later, someone called me from QVC, and they'd gotten this belt from this random lady. So you never know where a touch point will lead. And I have multiple stories like that where you just never know. So if you're out in the world and if you're engaging with people and if you're networking, you might not see where that's leading in the moment, but every little touch point with another person leads somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Being open to possibilities.
Right, yeah, for sure.
So, Jess, we didn't really hear, you started your company with a classmate from business school, but how did you get to the idea of starting that business?
So back when I was a management consultant, I was living in New York City right out of Williams with two of my best friends from Williams, and we lived in a probably 5-story walk-up, and I don't suggest you do this, but if you have to, it's okay, it'll be fine. And I was traveling all the time. I was really traveling all the time, and I had no food in my fridge. My apartment was a mess. My mom kept like calling me. She's like, "You're missing this birthday, you're missing that birthday, this, that, the other." And I was sort of like, there has got to be a better way to do this. Like, I've graduated from Williams, I have a decent job, like, I probably should be able to like have a clean home and a space that I can come back to. So that's where I encountered the pain point. And that kind of stayed with me. And as I kind of looked at my life going forward, and I was like, at some point I'm going to have a family. At some point, you know, things are only going to get more complicated. And I think that the ability to have clean mental space and clean physical space really make you able to be the person that you want to be and go do that stuff. So how do I create that opportunity for many more people? You know, it shouldn't be something that only like the wealthiest of the wealthy can access. So kind of combining looking at the future of where my life was going or is going, and just common pain points that I had, I was sort of like, there like really just has to be a better way. And Alfred was born from that. Alfred wasn't originally called Alfred. Alfred went through like 17 names and a lot of branding and a lot of testing and iterating, but effectively he was born from that.
Great, thanks. So asking each of you maybe what was one of the toughest challenges you faced in starting your company? So not necessarily a failure, but just a challenge that you came across or had to overcome.
Mentally or?
Yeah, if that was the toughest challenge. Yeah,
well, no, I think a challenge for me
was
as
it funding, was it mental, was it time,
yes.
whatever. Yeah.
All of the above. All of the above. You know, I think for me as somebody who is very organized, likes to have a plan, the unknowns of a startup were a challenge. I mean, with both of my experiences so far, it's sort of like, are we going to be paid this month or not? You know, what's the future look like? You know, nothing ever goes according to forecasts. You can do your best forecasts, you can be as conservative as you want, but you know, in both of the companies that I've been involved in, we've been ahead of the market. You know, we've got the product, the customers aren't there yet. So I think it's just sort of hanging on, and in the back of your head as an economics major, you're going, sunk costs, sunk costs. You know, I'm supposed to understand the idea of sunk costs. When do I say enough is enough? And, you know, fortunately, you know, I stuck it out long enough with Subimo that we had a great outcome, and I'm trying to do my best on this current company too. But, you know, there's a lot of unknown, and it's sort of knowing when are you being tenacious and smart, and when are you ignoring some costs, I think is a hard thing.
Do you have a board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
hopefully helping you
Oh yeah, yeah,
with those
yeah,
kinds
yeah.
of judgments.
Yeah. So you do that at a personal level, and you do that
Yeah,
at a
right.
corporate
No, but
level
I'm
too.
just
Yeah,
curious,
yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
For me, I think the biggest challenge is an ongoing challenge, which is my self-doubts began in 2004. So 10 years later, which is insane to think about. My son, who inspired this with his droopy drawers, just got his driver's permit. So it's been a while. So my biggest challenge is really, it's like a larger question. It's like, what is success? When are you successful? You know, Williams teaches us to be driven and to want to reach our potential. And for me, I've grown a nice business. I have employees. They, you know, it helps put food on their table. You know, I've done good things. Like I have had, in theory, a successful business. But I know that my business has so much more potential. So I think that is my biggest challenge and struggle is like, what have I done? Like, what else could I be doing? What is the missing puzzle piece? Like you know, when I wake up in the morning, like that is my biggest challenge, struggle, and it's ongoing. I'm hoping Shark Tank might be my savior. But that's why I went on Shark Tank, is because, you know, I have been doing this for 10 years, and with my skills and all that I know how to do, I've done the best I can. But I know that it can be so much more, and so that's why I went on the show. But that's my kind of ongoing psychological challenge, struggle.
Yeah, my most recent historical psychological or challenge was actually deciding to do the business. Since I was in the middle of school and I was kind of like looking at my, you know, school life and talking to my mom, who was not thrilled when I told her I was leaving school, but kind of saying, I'm going to commit to do this thing, and I recognize that there are risks, and there's this big question mark and the upside, and I'm just going to put a bet on that and say, you know what, I think there's something here, and I think that me and my co-founder have the ability to go after that. So there's a lot of committing. When making the decision to commit, I thought was really, really challenging. And now, right now, we're still a young company. We're about a year old. The amount of like getting up in the morning and still kind of like building a product, trying to figure out, how do I get press? How do I get funding? Should we do TechCrunch? If we do TechCrunch, like, what does that even mean? And just kind of every day is a leap of faith that you kind of know what you're doing. And you know, you can go to bed at night and sort of say like, oh my God, I totally failed, I messed that up. But the next morning you have to wake up and go into the office and be like, guys, we're gonna conquer the world. So I think that is a hard thing, but a meaningful one.
I think what would be helpful, I think, for everybody is if you could give us a sense of the size of your company, revenue-wise, number of employees, because I don't think people probably have a good sense of that, and it'd be interesting.
So we're privately held, so I can't share financials, but we have about 30 employees. We're basically concentrated in Chicago, but we have a lot of remote employees as well. And we do a lot of work with outside developers and third-party resources as well to really, you know, get the skill set that we need.
And Tracy, you started the company in?
Connected Health, my current company, we started in 2005.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I'm sorry, 2009, May of 2000. I'm thinking 2009. You're trying to figure out, how'd she do that when she was selling the other company?
I was thinking, wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, 2009. So we've been around for a couple years, and you know, with the advent of ACA health reform, it's been interesting.
I have 2 part-time employees who come to work every day, and 2 other people who work from their own homes, like doing marketing and business development. My little quote that I say is that we've sold $2 million worth of belts, but that's over a long span of time. I guess that's it, yeah.
That's
so
great.
it's
So you
small,
have
a small little
workforce.
business.
You're not all in one place.
No, we're not in one place, and we're not even in one city. So it's the beautiful, and the belts are made in China. It's the beautiful thing about, I mean, for you guys, like the beautiful thing about the internet, it's such a silly thing to say. But when I was at school, there was no email. So, but it is incredible how small the world becomes. And how also, as what we're speaking to before, if you don't know the answer to a question that someone emails you, you don't have to tell them. You can go find out the answer, which I am so grateful for. You're not on the spot. You can go do research and then respond in such an educated way. And I think it's amazing that no one knows where you are, and you can have employees all over the place. Great.
We are about a year old. I just hired 3 people, so I'm counting my team. We have about 7 on our kind of core executive team, and then I have about 20 and growing field employees. We're in Boston. We've been operating in Boston for about 8 to 9 months, and we just entered New York in beta for the last month.
Okay. And what's interesting is that your employees probably aren't remote because they're service.
That's right. They are real people in the world.
But 2 out of the 3 businesses have remote employees, and you think about a number of years ago that just wouldn't have happened. So the business models can all be so varied now too. I mean, there's just so many opportunities. And
We
ways to do
actually,
things.
with Sabimo, my previous company, at the point we sold the company to WebMD, everybody was remote. We never had office space at that company. We had about 32 people.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So you talk about, you know, the interesting things about building a company culture when everybody's remote. We had to be really thoughtful about what we did with that. But it was fun.
So are you guys willing to share stories about how you were financed?
Sure.
Be interesting to hear, because some have VC. This will help these guys once they're thinking down the road, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Sabimo, we went out and raised money from friends and family. We raised, I think, about $750,000. And with the business model that we had, what we were doing with that company was we were creating decision support tools for consumers, help them understand where to go when they needed a knee replacement, for example, what was the hospital with the best quality and cost outcomes. And so we were licensing that, and so through our licensing revenues, we actually never had to go out and raise additional capital, which was great.
Which is why they survived.
Yeah, why it was right. So and we also did a
revenue streams are really important.
Recurring revenue streams, and between that point of using up the friends and family money and getting the recurring revenue streams, we did some bootstrapping. So the founders went without salaries for about a year and a half. So, which is what I was talking about before with that unknown from month to month of, which gets challenging. But you know, if you can do that and hang on to the ownership that you have in the company, that's how you get a bigger payout in the end, in the event of a transaction.
So good to have a gainfully employed partner.
Exactly. Although, ironically, when we started Subimo, my husband and I both left our jobs on the same day. So he left without another one lined up. I left knowing I was starting the company. He went to a startup that flamed out in about a year and a half, and then went on to be gainfully employed. So there was a lot of unknown. This was before kids, too.
We were self-funded. My sister and I both put in money. It's funny, now that I've done the show, like, all my dirty laundry is going to be exposed. So we put in about $120,000 together. And immediately we were profitable, and immediately we were able to pay ourselves back within probably a year of business. So it was a good risk. I mean, I knew that if I had the problem with my child, that there were lots of parents with similar problems. So we thought it was a risk worth taking. But then we never have had to get any funding since then. The business has funded itself.
We started with grants from, I was at Harvard, so I got grants from school basically to fund the company over a summer. And then
And that was $50,000, is that right?
No, so what Harvard offers is if you don't want to go and have have a job basically, if you want to start a company, then you can get a grant to work on a company. So they give you $6,000 over the summer. So that was the initial seed that went into our company, and then we won our business plan competition, which was $50,000.
Okay.
And that went into the rest. So that was and the rest of it was bootstrapped. And we also really wanted to make sure that we were at least profitable on our variable basis. So we were always making money from day one. We never were actually running a loss on a variable basis. And then we closed our seed round, which I think is public now, which is $2 million in July.
So your seed round was angel investors, venture
It was
capitalists?
venture. It was venture and angel funds.
So how is your reception as a woman CEO or co-women, heads of this company in a service business?
That's a good question. So in truth, we're a combination of we're a tech-enabled service platform. So we never really, we could have taken the female line. We never actually played that card. We could have been pigeonholed.
No, you probably were better off not
no,
playing
we
that
know we
card,
really
to be
didn't.
honest, but-
We really didn't. But we talked to a lot of venture capitalists. We talked to a lot of funders. Most of them were men. And it's a really good litmus test. If you get a reception that has nothing to do with your gender, then you can probably imagine working with them. So I can tell you I had a really good filter right up front. But by and large, and this may be surprising, there was only a couple people where I could tell you that me or us being women made a difference. We did not find that to be the case. In general, people assessed us as people. In general, people assessed our business as a business, and they saw kind of what we wanted to do. There were some people who had a hard time imagining the problem, and we figured out ways to address that. So typically, we'll say, think of your mom when you were growing up. Or how do you trigger someone to kind of be in that mindset? So we had to play with that a little bit because our audience tended to be male and the problem can be most easily identified with women. But in general, it didn't really actually play that much of a role, which is a great thing, I think.
Yeah, no, it is. Because I think a number of years ago, I think women entrepreneurs had a tougher time. There's this whole Springboard thing that there were these, Springboard was raising money with women entrepreneurs in different parts of the country. And I was still in venture capital at the time. And it was such tokenism that the firms would send their junior people to this women's event and so anyway, I'm glad to hear that your reception was better than I think it was back 20 years, a while ago when I was in venture capital. I stepped out, in the early 2000s. So anyway, this would be a good time to turn it over and ask questions. Have you guys ask questions of the panel? Love to hear what you guys have for our panelists here. Any questions? Sure.
So tomorrow, you were to wake up and your entire entrepreneurial experience was forgotten like that. What is one thing you would like to remember, be it a specific event or some relationship or a trait you learned? But what's that one thing you would like to hold dear in your heart? Everything else is forgotten.
That's a hard one.
I would say that feeling of making something, actually having a vision and realizing that vision, and whether it's a service, a product. I mean, I do, I like to make things. So being able to say, yeah, I made that is important to me.
This is a hokey answer, and I'm really kicking myself because I'm about to give it. So I apologize that. But the thing that I probably wouldn't, if I only really could remember one moment, it was the moment that I gave my first customer the product, and they were just so happy. And I was I built something that made someone, just one person, feel this way, and that is so cool. I still remember that. So it's a hokey answer, but that's the truth of it.
No, that's what I was going to say too, actually, is that those conversations with customers, knowing that our invention has made someone else's day easier. Those are those moments that I love. I mean, people always say, as your business becomes a little bigger, you should delegate everything. And my favorite thing is customer service. So I delegate it, but I love when I get to do it because it really is the highlight.
Sure.
You talked about male entrepreneurs being slightly more money-minded in general. Can you maybe elaborate on that or shed light on why that might be the case?
Could you repeat the question?
Male.
We can't hear you very well up here.
Sure. At the start of the discussion, you talked about male entrepreneurs being slightly more money-minded in general. I just want to know why that might be the case. So can you shed light on some experience you had and why you think that way?
That men were more money-minded, what you said in the beginning.
Yeah, that was my comment, and I was saying, I was speaking to my experience with my partners in my venture capital firm in terms of being more money, and so that was, I think we were saying, no one here said they wanted to be an entrepreneur to make a lot of money, and we were just making the comment earlier that we might have heard that if we were sitting here listening to a group of men. Maybe not, but that just based on my experience with venture capital, and you said your experience with your partners wanting to, how quickly can we monetize this business? Let's start it, flip it, make a bunch of money, and that wasn't the way you were approaching it.
And that's not such a bad thing that they were saying that. I mean, somebody has to be focused on the money. They happen to be the sales guys too, so that was good that they wanted to go out and generate the revenues. So, not necessarily bad.
Yeah, it's not bad to make money, but it was just funny that it didn't come
What's
up
the-
as
yeah.
anybody's driving force here on this panel.
And there is gender difference. I mean, men and women look at things differently, and when I was practicing for the show, I realized that everyone I practiced with was a woman, and I'm like, this is bad. I need to find some guys to, yell questions at me, and they asked totally different questions. And so, if you have a team, having men on the team and women on the team, everyone brings something else to the table. So I think that those differences are really valuable.
Another question? Yes.
So none of you identified wanting to be an entrepreneur as the thing that was foremost in your mind when you graduated. And now as you look ahead and say 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, do you think you'll still be entrepreneurs, or do you think you'll transition into some different new challenge?
That's a good question.
For me, I think that I cannot imagine going to a regular job where I'm working for somebody else. I just can't, you're so used to being your own boss. I think that would be very difficult, but I do think whatever I do next, and I've kept up my social work license all this time, will be some sort of entrepreneurial endeavor in that world. Probably what I was maybe going to do before will be probably my next thing.
A social entrepreneur.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
I think, so the implicit answer I'm going to give is yes, I'm going to go build things. But I actually just think being an entrepreneur, what we're talking about is a way of looking at the world and thinking, and you can do that in a company. So you can be entrepreneurial in the context of an organization. You can be entrepreneurial in the context of your own business. So I think I will always be entrepreneurial because it's a set of characteristics, way of working, things that stimulate me, regardless of whether it's me running a company or being in a corporation.
And I agree with Jess. I can look down the road and see that I really enjoy identifying needs, solving problems, making things. So, whether I want to start a third company and do that, I don't know. But I do know that that is a part of how I define myself and part of what I need to do.
Brian.
So, and you can answer this too, Laurie. One thing I'm wondering is, since you guys are obviously all leaders in your companies, and leaders are looked up to by the people who are not running the company, whether you struggled at all or thought a lot about your image as the leader of your company, like how you kind of maintain your leadership style and like what kind of leadership style you actually are looking to cultivate, and just kind of like maybe thoughts that you guys have on that.
Everybody want to go first?
So that's a really good question. So I think people definitely have different leadership styles. And there's the lesson I've had to learn, and I've had to learn it as I left corporate and I really went into a very unstructured environment, is that what's more important, and I'll juxtapose them for you. So in my first 4 years out of college, like knowing things, like knowing was really important. And being able to be confident and say, this is what I think the truth is, and this is this, that, the other, there was a value placed on that. Fast forward to where I am now, not knowing is the most important thing, in a sense. And I think that what I've found is you have to sort of be as authentic as you can. So yes, you're a leader. You have to create direction. You have to instill confidence in people. But in order to do that, people will be able to sense really quickly if you're faking it. So it's also okay to say, you know what, I don't know, here's how we're going to figure it out. And being able to find that authentic line, and that's really different for different people. I tend to be a bottoms-up leader, so I will kind of sit in the morning and say, like, here's what we're doing, and then I want everyone else to kind of group in, and I kind of push from behind. My co-founder is a top-down leader. We complement each other in that way, but there's just so many different leadership styles.
For me, with a small business, I think it's partially my leadership style and partially who I've hired. It's amazing to me. I think the two people working for me now have been there for 4 years, and they say we, and they think it's like the business is theirs too, and the ownership that they feel and the desire that they have to help the business to grow, I'm just astounded by it. It's amazing. I don't know how they came into my life or how, and obviously I'm doing something to cultivate that, but I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, except that we're a team, and they know where my head is and they know what my goals are, but they really, really care about the business growing, and I find it amazing when I hear them talking to other people that they have that investment, that emotional investment in it. So I think that that's really important too.
I think it's an interesting question for me personally because I've played very different roles in the companies that I've been involved in. In the early stages, I've been very hands-on as a product leader, product developer, working very closely with developers. And that's a different leadership style where you're very much in the trenches together versus now being much more of a product strategy, vision type of leader. And I think, there's a different sort of level of credibility and being out there sort of surveying the world and bringing that back and how does that apply to our product. And it's just, it's a different type of leadership for me to think about.
And I would just say from, going back to my venture capital days, we were a team and we made in a partnership, and so you were sort of having to do very collaborative and building consensus on the investments we made, but on the other hand, you also in a sense were selling your own investments and had to build consensus for what you were doing. So yeah, there was a bit about being, getting as much, doing the best work that you could to get the answers and make the case for what you were doing and having confidence in what you were doing and being able to take the tough questions when Shark Tank, and when people are firing them at you, your partners, because we weren't easy on each other, and so part of that is just working as hard as you can to do the work, and having grace under fire. I think the toughest times are when things are really stressful, and being a leader and trying to stay calm through those, because that gives other people confidence too. In bad situations, I had plenty of, as any venture capital, they're lying if they say they didn't have some bad situations. You constantly are encountering problems and things that you have to work through, and part of that is having good judgment and calm and sort of working through the problems, trying to figure them out, and asking for input from others, whether it be your board members or the management team, to how do you go forward and do that.
So
Yes, Wendy.
I have a question for Talia about your brand extension into the special needs market. Was that part of your original business plan, or as a result of your earlier work in social work, or was it sort of an opportunistic market extension that you encountered?
It was actually in our initial patent application. We mentioned that that area, but we didn't actually make adult or larger size belts till a few years in. And then we decided to do that. But it really is it's such a different business. It's a totally different market. The kids' belts are easy to sell. We've sent them to celebrities, so they've been photographed. The adult belts and teen belts, it's an adaptive clothing aid. It's a very different, like one is a fashion product, one is an easy dressing aid. And so the hard thing is to do sales in those completely different arenas. So the children's belts is a much larger part of our business than the adult belts, but the customers that we hear from with kids with autism or the use of only one hand for different reasons, it's so gratifying, that part of it, that it's fun to watch that side now kind of pick up some steam.
Other questions? Well, I have another one for you. So if you guys were to start all over again, your recent grads, would you have done anything differently in your careers? Like thinking about it.
No.
No.
I think that everything that I did leading up to jumping off the cliff and becoming an entrepreneur really prepared me. I went and worked for a small company. It wasn't quite a startup, but it was a small company out of Williams. I spent a couple years doing consulting work after graduate school, and I think that perhaps more than anything prepared me to tackle unknown issues. How many times did you get put into a situation where you knew nothing about it? Yeah. So, just understanding there's, this thing that I need to do, and I really don't know anything about it, but I know how to tackle it. And I think, I look back and I don't feel like there's anything that I did leading up to starting Sabimo that was extraneous or not useful.
I think it's all building blocks to the next thing, so it's so hard to imagine a different path, to get to this point. So no, I wouldn't change anything.
I wouldn't change anything either. Not that I have that much I can change. So. But I would say, one of the things that I think, whether you guys may know what you want to do, you may not. I had no idea. But the thing is, just be curious, and you can be curious in so many different places in so many different ways. And I think it echoes what we've been saying, which is if you put yourself on the path, then something will hit you.
Well, and when you and I talked earlier, Laurie, you mentioned that, to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to go out and start your own thing. There are lots of ways to do entrepreneurial things. You can go join a small company, go join a startup, get your feet wet that way. It doesn't have to be your idea that you're executing.
And each decision that you're making now, it's not like you're deciding your life's path in this moment. It's for sure you're not. So the pressure of that moment doesn't need to be there, because it's just going to lead to something different.
Yeah, that's really important for you seniors especially to be thinking about. Like, your first job is not going to be your destiny. And being open to ideas and thinking about, so where does this lead me to? And my work, I came out of here as a commercial banker, an avenue that isn't even a path out of here any longer, but that led me to venture capital. Venture capital led me to venture entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, to corporate boards. But did I have a plan that I was going to do any of that? Absolutely not. And I think that's where you got to go. I think, Jess said it earlier, others have said it, go with your passion and what you really love, and you'll figure that out as you're working. And if the first thing is you don't really like it, time to move on. Life's too short. Find the things that you like and people that you like working with.
Yeah, I think that's important too, finding people
Really
that you like
important.
working with, that you trust, especially if you're starting a company with them. Yeah.
Yes, another question.
So, what does a day in your entrepreneurial lives, like a typical day, what does that look like?
Is there a typical day?
No, chaos. Chaos.
Okay, start, Jeff.
All right, so I'm going to caveat this and say, remember when I was a management consultant, there was a lot of things I learned about that process that I somehow have translated into being an entrepreneur. So this may be non-standard. My day starts every day with a team call, and we go around the team and we say the goals for we have a roadmap of what we're trying to get to. So the goals for the week are X, and the goals for your day are Y. And at the end of the day, we check back and we hold ourselves accountable. Did we or did we not achieve those goals? I'd say I then spend about 20% of my time trying to recruit people. So it's posting job ads, interviewing people, networking to find the people that we should bring onto our team. I spend another so let's call that the morning, right? I get to lunch. And then I spend probably another, 2 or 3 hours just solving problems that come up. So the operations broke today, why? This client is unhappy, who is going to fix it? That kind of thing. And then the last part of the day is really kind of maintaining and checking in on the team. Who needs help in what way, and how can I help them unlock or get an obstacle out of the way? So at least 30% of it is firefighting, where you just don't know what you have to do, and you just got to figure it out.
Okay, and Jess, what is a typical hours in a day for you? And we'll ask each of these as they answer your question, but I'm just...
So I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I don't suggest that this is how you live your life, but it is, that's fine. I typically work from probably 7:30 in the morning till about 12 or 1 in the evening.
Wow.
I have
Okay.
a lot of things to do and not a lot of people to do them yet.
So for me, my day is similar, checking in with the other people who work with me, the goals for the day, having my higher goals for myself of what I need to do, and then a lot of firefighting skills. And then I'm a mom, I have 3 kids, and I bring them to school, I pick them up from school. My business works really well with my lifestyle, and it's great for my kids to get to watch, being an entrepreneur and what that means. So I work throughout the day and I work at night, and as in my Twitter bio, I dream about belts. Yeah.
I have, fortunately, in this second company, worked myself into a role that is much more of a part-time role and an advisory role, but sort of being responsible for the product vision and thinking about our consumers. I do anything from, earlier this week I was doing user testing because we're about to do a release and we needed somebody to do it, and I said, all right, I'll jump in and do that, and it's a way for me to sort of bring the things that we're hearing back to the product. I get tasked to help with proposals, anything where we're sort of looking at the vision of the company. So, and then, my dream job, which I get to do maybe 10% of the time, is to go out and read everything I can get my hands on about behavioral economics and how people make decisions, and then think about, well, how are we going to do that with our products? So I kind of have that stuff. The thing that I've realized about that latter piece is, you take in stuff and it sort of percolates in the back of your head, and then suddenly, you go to the bathroom or you go for a run and it comes together in this product idea. So I'm lucky to be able to be doing this on a part-time basis, because I also have young kids and they're at an age where I like to be spending some of that time with them. So it took a long time to get there, though.
You earned your stripes.
I think so. I hope so.
Other questions from the group? Yes.
What are your favorite books?
Oh, good question. I have a lot, so I have to think about it.
Lately, I've been reading just fiction because it's the only thing that has let my brain escape the stress of what's been happening for the last few months of my life with the show and what's about to come. It's like my only thing that lets me escape. So I've been kind of voracious in reading because it's been mentally healthy for me to do that. But like work-related books, someone just told me about this book, Jab, Jab, Right Hook, and I can't think of the author, but it's about social media. And I just read that, and it was really interesting about how best to promote your business via social media.
So I'm going to give you 3 books, if that's okay. I really like Freedom by Jonathan Franzen. There we go. So I really like that book quite a lot. I read Thinking Fast and Slow, which I think is a fabulous book, especially as you think about working with people and how do you build product or work with people in a way that stimulates on multiple levels. And I just picked up, and I'm quite enjoying Anti-Fragile, which is by the fellow whose name I can't remember. As you can tell, I'm probably bad with names, who wrote Black Swan.
I agree with you about reading for escape. It's the thing that shuts my brain off at night. So a lot of times I turn to fiction for that, and I can't, unfortunately, remember anything great that I've read lately. But I have plowed through a lot of books. But from a sort of business or work-related interest perspective, I really have liked John Rady's books. He wrote Spark, which is about exercise and how it helps your brain and your body, and then he wrote another book recently called Go Wild. And it's, I think there's this movement afoot in terms of taking personal responsibility for our health and well-being, and he's got a lot of great stuff in there. So
My favorite book of late is Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. I don't know if you've read that, but if you haven't, you must. It's an incredible book. Did you read that?
I have not, but now I can.
You were nodding. I'll link you.
Well, it has really been great having all of you here. We are out of time. You guys asked great questions. Thank you all for coming. And Jeffrey is going to close for us, but thank you
just
all.
with 3 quick pieces of business. First, we really emphasize mentorship and taking advantage of the alumni network and all the wisdom that's there. And unfortunately, both Jessica and Talia need to leave early tomorrow morning, but Tracy's going to be here and available to meet with you, to talk about entrepreneurship, more about her experience, talk about your ideas for a startup potentially. And there's a sign-up sheet outside if you're interested. That's 1. 2, Miriam DeFisi has arrived safely. Happy for that. I will quickly say her Twitter bio. Entrepreneur, CEO of Minta.com, mom of 2, and San Francisco resident. So we have 5 mom entrepreneurs here. I just want to emphasize that. Miriam.
I don't think I'm ready to be a mom.
4 and.
I aspire to that. I'm an aspiring mother, okay?
Jumped ahead.
Great.
Tomorrow in Goodrich, starting at 7, Miriam and another Williams alum, Ian Smith, and a friend of Miriam's, and sort of a partner of Miriam, someone who has invested in Miriam's companies and is invested in some other companies you may have heard of, like Dropbox and Zynga and Facebook and some others that you might know. They are going to talk about how you get started with your startup, the ideation phase, and how you, and then they're going to organize a meetup where you can hopefully find some other students on campus with similar interests. And then perhaps you and those other students might want to submit your idea to this year's Business Plan Challenge.
Yeah, and we're happy to answer. We'll see where the evening takes us. So if more people want to spend time asking how to get it off the ground versus meeting up, we'll sort of poll the audience to find out. But Ian is one of the really good top, I guess I would call him investment banker consiglieres in the country now, and he's a Williams grad from NE2, to the consumer internet industry. So it's just a nice coincidence to have us both here.
It's terrific, a terrific opportunity. So please come if you can. And then finally, just a final thanks to everyone that was involved in pulling this together, a lot of people in the Career Center and the Office of College Relations. Thanks to Mariah for kicking things off, to Jessica, Talia, Tracy, and Laurie for this great discussion. Thank you, guys.